What's up, YouTube faithful and Death Shadow enthusiasts? So, as a lot of you have probably seen by now, X-File took down the Saturday Modern Challenge with a pretty sweet Sultai Traverse Invasion of Ikoria Death Shadow brew. Uh, Whole bunch of stuff to unpack here. So let's go over the deck list for anybody that hadn't seen it, and then we'll get into some of the matches we ran. First league, running like completely blind with this deck, just seeing what happens. So at the core, we do have just like a pretty proactive Death Shadow shell with 4 Shadow, 4 Tarmogoyf, 4 Traverse the Ulvenwald, 4 Street Wraith, 4 Bauble. Apparently, I cut the lands out here, but I think it's 19 lands, including 1 Dryad Arbor, basic Swamp, no basic Forest, whole bunch of fetches to help with the Baubles, Street Wraiths, Enable Delirium. But in addition to the creature package, we also have like our 4 Thoughtseize, 4 Fatal Push, and then it starts to get a little off the rails. So after we got our creatures and some of our standard card draw and interaction, we've got 2 copies of Stubborn Denial, great in our Tarmogoyf Death Shadow deck. 3 copies of Dress Down in the main, really good against Urza Saga, against any of like the pitch elementals. Can be a little awkward at times with Tarmogoyf, but at the same time, I've kind of preached for a while now that Modern's about playing the really good cards, not so much trying to play the good synergies. We've got this cheeky little vampire hex mage in here, which, if you don't know this combo, Invasion of Ikoria. Let's bring that up so we can see it a little bit better. Invasion of Ikoria is a new card type called Battles from the new set March of the Machines. So this is 2 green and X. When it enters the battlefield, search your library and or graveyard for a non-human creature card with mana value X or less and put it onto the battlefield. If you search your library this way, shuffle. So for 2 green and 1 of any color, you can tutor up a Death Shadow. For 2 green and 2, you can tutor up a Vampire Hex Mage or a Tarmogoyf. The important part being with Hex Mage, you can go to immediately sacrifice the Hex Mage, remove the counters off the Invasion of Ikoria, and it becomes an 8/8 dinosaur with reach. And an important line of text below it: for each non-human creature you control, which is every creature in our deck, you may have that creature assign its combat damage as though it weren't blocked. So you flip an Invasion of Ikoria, and it essentially becomes make all your team unblockable for the turn. They can be blocked, they can have damage dealt back to them, but the idea is kind of to set up a one-shot by just being able to plow through, knock out your opponent with whatever you have sitting around. Sorry, text message. And with the Vampire Hex Mage, you can start up kind of this chainsaw effect of, hey, I've got an Invasion of Ikoria. I'm going to pay for, go get my Hex Mage, sack it to remove the counters from that invasion, get an 8/8. Then I'll play another invasion for 4, get the Hex Mage out of my graveyard, because you can look from your graveyard instead of your library, sack it again, get another 8/8 that can't be blocked. Can be, but you don't care if it is. And repeat the process. So a lot of synergy options, as well as the Hex Mage. You have a single Grist that you can tutor off of Invasion. If you Invasion for 5, you can go get Grist. If you Invasion for 0, you can go get Dryad Arbor. Give you a little bit of ramp, as well as fuel for sacrificing Grist, a chump blocker, whatever the case may be. And that's about it for the main deck. In the sideboard, we've got a Flusterstorm, a Dress Down, 2 Spreading Seas, 2 Collective Brutality, a Force of Vigor, 2 Veil of Summer, 3 Nihil Spellbomb, 3 Engineered Explosives. Sideboard, there's a bunch of cards we haven't seen in a minute. For example, like Collective Brutality, Nihil Spellbomb. Haven't seen a lot of those cards recently. Honestly, outside of creativity, haven't seen a lot of Veil of Summer, but it's always worth to give it a shot. 4 dress downs in the 75 is definitely going to be a house against Urza Saga decks. But again, you never know how things are going to go until you start playing. So let's go ahead and jump into the matches so we can kind of see how this went. Again, this is my first run through with the deck. I have not sat here and studied the list. I have not gone over any like gameplay or opinions. I'm just went through this league and now going back over to voice it. Opening hand, no lands, easy mull. Second hand, pretty straightforward Death Shadow action. Wraith, Bauble, Thoughtseize, fetch land. Really brings you back to Gurmag Angler in 2017. So if you missed it there, we bobbled ourselves. We saw an Abrupt Decay. I figure since we're up against what's probably scam based off like a Blackcleave Cliffs Go, then Blood Moon could be relevant. Fable of the Mirror Breaker could be relevant. So good chance this Abrupt Decay is live. Thoughtseize, we see Bolt, Dolthy, Spyro, a couple lands. We'll just take a Terminate so that we can get down a Goy for a Shadow next turn and have it survive. Opponent gets their Dolthy down. We could go ahead and Abrupt Decay the Dolthy, but I think I just want to get like a threat on board. And as long as I get the Goyf down this turn, I can like Shadow plus Abrupt Decay next turn without too much of an issue. One thing I did notice about this list, and I wrote up like a couple initial notes on the Control Freak Discord, which obviously I'll have the link down below, but I really wanted a basic forest in this list. And spoiler alert, you'll see it come up a few times where either I don't want to have to fetch and shock as much, or I just don't have kind of the flexibility to get that basic forest. We went up against well, I guess we'll wait to give away the ending. Either way, dress down the Spyro helps a lot because they feigned death the other Spyro before they went to cast that one. So I would be able to just like block and get the free not get the Spyro back. Opponent goes for a K command and I guess realizes they're dead. I thought they were just going to get Spyro tokens back, but I guess they didn't have the 5th land. Sideboarding against Scam, just trimming on like some Hand Disruption, some Street Wraiths. I honestly did not notice that I had Veil of Summer in my sideboard this game. Obviously, that would have come in, but I was not used to seeing Veil of Summer. So that's on me. Sequencing here. We do have double bobble. I see Feign Death on top of their library. Usually you don't want to bobble on your turn against a Hand Disruption deck, but I want to find a Fatal Push and give myself the most chances of finding it. So I go for the double bobble on my turn, see Feign Death on their library, see that thing a land on mine. So I'm going to pass the turn. And in response to my bobble triggers, I'm going to crack my fetch. Now I've got Revolt in case I find a Fatal Push. Unfortunately, we just find a Goyf in a land, but whatevs. It's at least important to set ourselves up with the possibility of finding what we needed. Could have played out the Goyf there. Like I kind of figured they'd have a removal spell for something, so I like just playing out the 2 threats and give myself the most chance of getting around one removal spell. Then let's see. So I could have fetched and shocked before I attacked. It wouldn't change the clock any based off what I know, uh, which I think is why I didn't. Because they're going down to 9. I fetch and shock afterwards. I got 2 lethal shadows. If I had fetch and shock before, then they would be at 6 instead of 9. Goy still wouldn't be lethal. I'd still have to have a shadow connect. They end up dashing a Ragavan here. Wouldn't have mattered. I could have just fetched up a basic and attacked, but then I wouldn't have had lethal shadows. So I think the line was right, especially since I knew their unknown. One of their unknown cards was Feigned Death. So they had to draw something that killed me that turn. And they just happened to. Like, I would still have to answer the Dolphy, but I'd have to answer the Dolphy anyway. And this is game 3. So, get our first look at Invasion, and it's gone. Tarmogoyf's a good pickup. So we know that's going to be thicker than a Snickers. Goyf hopefully enough to put the fear of God into anything that comes down in front of it. But it evokes a Fury, so expecting like a follow-up Bolt, and then they don't. I think what might have happened here is they didn't realize Battle was like a card type, which I don't know what they would have thought it was, but my guess is just didn't think about that. So between like Battle in the yard and Fury going to the yard, Goyf just gets really big, really fast. And now we find a second Goyf, so we can just jam that. We don't even have to like fetch and shock to get our shadows down. We've got a breeding pool we can tutor up. Go to our turn. If we need to fetch and shock to get down these shadows, we can. If not, we can just wait. It's like in this case, not really a big incentive to fire off the Misty Rainforest there because we don't know if we want to fetch and shock yet. We have Stubborn Denial up. We had Stubborn Denial up. Nice. On to match number 2. Up 1-0. Hand's okay. We've got like Thoughtseize into Hex Mage if we find a what's it called? A invasion. So against Gemstone Caverns, expecting it to be rhinos. Not rhinos, it is Mono Blue Tron. Mono Blue Tron that top decks a map on us. Kind of rude. I did notice the mana can be a little weird with like Hex Mage in your hand, because you're usually wanting to get like Overgrown Tomb, Watery Grave early if you've got Hex Mage or you've got Dress Down Stubborn Denial, but then you need double green to Invasion. So you really want like double Overgrown Tomb because you got a bunch of black cards like Shadow, Thoughtseize, Fatal Push. So the mana like really straightens itself out when you get to your 3rd land drop. But if you're sitting on 2, there can be times that it's a little tough. So just to talk about there, I needed Delirium to get these traverses online. Ultimately, like any other threat is clocking my opponent significantly more than a Hex Mage is. So I'm kind of okay giving up that Hex Mage to get a Tarmogoyf down in this case. I wanted to get a Tarmogoyf because my opponent has Blast Zone. So if they spend their next turn playing Blast Zone, ticking it up, I get an attack in with Tarmogoyf. Then the turn after, I can traverse for a Shadow, play the Shadow out. But if I traverse for a shadow right away, then they can just play the blast zone next turn and pop it, and I miss out on a decent chunk of damage. But they had a remand, so that plan kind of went out the window, and remand into Karn. Good talk. Good talk. We out here fighting. Could have traversed for a grist, but that's kind of meh. I know they've got liquid metal coating. I'm kind of hoping that they just Karn for like an ensnaring bridge and play it out. They almost did. Almost did. And then they stopped. It's like, dang. Gonna do that to me. Couldn't just get the ensnaring bridge down. So they blow up Shadow. As you can tell, we are quite a bit flooded. Map means they're going to be able to get Tron online next turn. Go ahead and Relic and knock my yard. So because they can get Tron online this turn, I couldn't attack with both of my creatures because then I'm just dead to haul the Storm Giants on the crackback. I decided to attack with Dryad Arbor for exactly that reason, that if my opponent pops the Relic, then Goyf's not doing anything. I can't fetch to help fuel my graveyard back up because I'm at 1 life. I just need to top deck like a Shadow or something. That doesn't work. So on to game number 2. Sideboarding against Mono Blue Tron's basically just like boarding out anything that says kill a dude, boarding in anything that says counter a spell or mess up a land. So Spreading Seas, Flusterstorm, boarding out like Fatal Pushes. That's about it. We're just trying to be like fairly aggressive and proactive, which is difficult when we don't have our lands. And opponent top decks a Chalice. That's going to kind of wreck anything we could have had going on here. Wraith into land. Got a Karn, and they choose not to tick up on their own Chalice of the Void. Can you believe it? And we got a Traverse that we can't cast, so... Yep. On to match 3. Losing to Mono Blue Tron kind of sucks when you're a deck that's just Thoughtseize into threat into usually hold up some amount of counter magic, but... All right. Talk about the opening sequence here. So we could have Thoughtseize the Utopia Sprawl. They had 4 lands or 3 lands: Utopia Sprawl, Blood Moon, Seasoned Pyromancer. I could have taken the Utopia Sprawl to kind of stop them from having a 2-drop. They would play their second land. I'd play second land and probably go like Goyf or something, and then go to their turn 3. They Blood Moon, and I just have to hope I win off Goyf. The other option is like this, where we plan on letting them Blood Moon and interact with it, whether that be Abrupt Decay or Stubborn Denial. I decided to go with Abrupt Decay because I didn't really want to show them the blue yet. But also Stubborn Denial could be live later against like Chandra Torch of Defiance or something like that that Abrupt Decay wouldn't interact with. So I figured giving my opponent this opportunity to tap out for Blood Moon, floating mana in response, decaying the moon, untapping, and having Goyf plus hold up Stubborn Denial would be a little more favorable for me in the long run. Like, hey, now I've got a Goyf, and this Goyf's protected from a bunch of stuff. And hey, now I've got another Goyf, and that Goyf's protected from some stuff. So yeah, we just kind of coast on Goyfs to victory. Luckily, Ponza has historically been a pretty positive match for any Shadow deck, having like Shadow and Goyf, because you just outgrow all the red base removal. Unfortunately, we have situations like this where our opponent's got to Arbor Elf on 1, and if they have Utopia Sprawl on 2, or just like any good 3-drop, we're folding heavily. One of my biggest takeaways from this deck was I don't think there's a good reason to not have a basic forest in the 75. And I would go as far as saying like basic forest over the Dryad Arbor. And it's mostly because you're a traverse deck and it's pretty easy to like somewhat play around Blood Moon with traverse in a basic forest, because you can always go get your basic forest early and then have that forest online to traverse for a basic swamp later. But if you don't have the basic forest, you have situations like this where I've got triple Tarmogoyf, and which would be fantastic against this deck, but I can't play them out because hey, I don't have a basic forest. And yeah, you'll have some number of games like this where you're just all in on like a quick Shadow or Goyf or something, or both. But you're giving up a whole bunch of percentage points when it doesn't work out that way. So yeah, here we just like Dryad Arbor Invasion for another Shadow. We could attack down our own Shadow with the Shadow, or attack down our own battle with the Shadow that we have out. Honestly, I probably would have just hit them in the face, because like, who needs an 8/8 that says my stuff can't be blocked when they're just dead? So this is match number 4, I believe. Hold up, Stubborn Denial. Oh look, more Tron. Tron, 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 Tron. I don't have another black source. All right. So we got Shadow, hold up, Stubborn Denial. If they don't Tron us, then we get to dress down into turn like this, untap, hit them for 13. Hopefully rinse and repeat the same formula for success next turn. I don't really need another invasion. I could like invasion for 1 for another Shadow. I don't think it really matters, especially if they just go like Blast Zone. So I'd rather save this invasion to be able to get something after a Blast Zone and hold up Stubborn Denial. Basically same sideboarding against Mono Green Tron as Mono Blue. Boarding out stuff that says kill a dude, boarding in things that say disrupt your lands or counter something. Collective Brutality, I think, is a little bit better against Mono Green Tron, because you have like Ancient Stirrings, Sylvan Scrying, or in this case, Noxious Revival and Warping Whale. So, stuff. Thankfully, our opponent is gracious enough to not lead on turn 3 Tron. So we've got the opportunity to Spreading Seas the tower, put them a little farther off. Was hoping to find a land so we could get down like a Shadow there, but doesn't work out that way. Decide to Brutality, get a bunch of extra card types in the yard so we can get in a big attack with Goyf. We figure they're gonna have to pop this O-Stone pretty aggressively anyway, so just hope the one turn payoff isn't too bad. Walking Ballista, okay. So Walking Ballista, hold up Warping Whale. We can kind of deal with that. If they had not blocked, I would just hold up Stubborn Denial here because I know that they've got Warping Whale, Karn, Unknown, and if they just untap and like play Karn, I want to be able to interact with that, force the jump again next turn, and then Spreading Seas or whatever. But since they blocked, I'll just go ahead and go for the Spreading Seas. Since I'm not like killing them next turn potentially. But I've got a 2-turn clock with Goyf. I've got a Stubborn Denial and a Prayer. I've got Icorias and Shadows kind of sitting around, doing nothing. Getting Dryad Arbor doesn't really do anything for me. Here, just get the shadow down, get a shadow down so I can have a second threat on board just in case they play another Warping Whale or something. Okay. So these are always moments that I really enjoy talking about because I think a lot of people see, oh, my opponent played a Chromatic Star. I've got a Stubborn Denial. I should just fire it off and like counter the non-creature thing, stop them from having another draw. And that thought's great, except you don't know that this is going to stop this chain. Like, the worst thing that can happen to me is my opponent plays a worm coil engine. But now that they've played a star, their unknowns, 3 unknowns, would have to be a land and a worm coil engine. But if they have like a Beseiju or something and they're able to interact with my Spreading Seas, then they might just be able to play a Karn like right now or something worse than Karn or whatever. So I'm just going to wait and see. In this case, they have Haywire Might for the Spreading Seas and go for an All Is Dust. If I had countered the Chromatic Star and their 2 unknown cards were the Haywire Might and the All Is Dust, they would be able to just play the Haywire Might, blow up the Spreading Seas, All Is Dust my board, and now I've got to rebuild. They've got Karn plus something else and all their mana unlocked. If they find something better, then I could just be like killing myself there. But thankfully, because we're patient, we get rewarded with just countering the All Is Dust. Now there is always a chance that they drew into the like Haywire Might off of the star. Entirely possible. But you have to kind of play it by ear. Like if my opponent had 1 card in hand and their 1 unknown card was Karn, they drew for turn and they played a Chromatic Star, I would just counter the star. But they didn't. They had like 3 cards in hand. So that 1 star kind of doesn't matter so much. All right, turn 1 Ragavan means it looks like it's scam again. Thoughtseize, take a Terminate so that our Shadow will live. See some interesting card choices out of them. Like this Touch of Moonglove. It's an instant from Magic Origins, I believe. Let's double check that. Touch of Moonglove. Yeah, instant from Magic Origins. Way, way back. That says target creature you control gets +1/+0 and gains Death Touch until end of turn. Whenever a creature dealt damage by that creature dies this turn, its controller loses 2 life. I have no idea if there's like some combo with this deck or with that card or what, because it's not an undying effect. It just says like my thing gets death touch. Like if you block it, we're gonna trade. Um, Maybe it's the fact that it combos with like Fury, so you can kill a bunch of big stuff. Don't know. All I know is we are like aggressively dead here. On to game two. Sideboarding just like we did earlier, out with some Thought Seizes, some Wraiths, Inquisition. I did board in the Veil of Summers this time because I realized they were in my sideboard. In Breeding Pool, go ahead and traverse for our Swamp. Just in case they have like a Blood Moon start, but also so we can get down Goyf on turn 2 guaranteed, or have Abrupt Decay up. If opponent does go for like a Lightning Bolt on the Goyf, it would grow the Goyf to a 3/4. Goyf wouldn't die to the Bolt, but they're just going to go Dolthy here, so we'll kill the Dolthy, get a couple card types, get Nihil Spellbomb down. As we can see, this is kind of a little bit of the awkwardness with the mana. Like, we know we have double green cards like Ikoria in the deck, Invasion of Ikoria, and we can't, like, really tutor them up because, or we can't really play them if we find them because we don't have double green. But we couldn't get a basic forest. But if we had a basic forest, we could have like traversed for a forest and then had another traverse to get the swamp and had our double green plus our black. So it's just kind of one of those random situations that I think would be smoothed out a little bit if we just had a basic forest. And like not being able to play or not having a basic forest right there meant I couldn't like traverse for a Tarmogoyf and play it out or something. So I end up losing out on a mana because that Dryad Arbor is not a basic forest. So opponent Ragavans us into their turn. They dress down to shut off my Tarmogoyf for the turn. Pretty heads up play out of them. But we do just get like double shadow, so we're not out of the race here. If they have Fury, it's going to be pretty unfortunate. Reckless Impulse for a Dolthy is slightly less unfortunate. We're just going to hang out with this Veil of Summer in case we can find something cool. All right. I could have attacked with just like 2 and kept 1 back for the Dolthy or for the Ragavan. But since I found a way to lower my life total, it means that any combination of 2 threats is lethal. So they have to block 2 things with the Ragavan and the Spyro, which puts the Spyro in the yard, lets me go ahead and exile it with Nihil Spellbomb, gets the Ragavan off the board, and I don't have to fetch and shock. It's just having the threat of being able to do it there is a big deterrent. Funny Nambo there. They have Touch of Moonglove, which should kill my Goyf and make me lose 2 life. But Touch of Moonglove specifies when a creature dealt damage this way dies, its controller loses 2 life. Well, Dolthy exiles the creature instead of it dying, so I don't actually lose the 2 life there. Dolthy back one of my Goyfs to block. That's fine. We're still outgrowing Goyf. They've got 1 card in hand. On my upkeep, they go for a Shieldred's Edict. I know that Veil of Summer does not stop Shieldred's Edict. So I'm going to cast the Veil of Summer just to try to redraw into like a counter spell or removal spell or something. Just because like this Veil is sitting here rotting in my hand. I need to get some sort of value out of it. So we'll go ahead and get that. We find Ikoria. So we've got lethal at this point. Even if we sack a shadow, we can Ikoria for 2, fetch shock, Ikoria for 2, go get Hex Mage, sack the Hex Mage on the Ikoria, get the 8/8 dude, and just attack with a shadow, deal damage straight to them as if it wasn't blocked. But we just draw a Fatal Push, and I guess that works just as well. So now we can just like attack him with shadow. We could invasion for another shadow, whatever the case may be. And this is on to game number 3. It's kind of a slow hand with just like Hex Mage on 2 or hold up push, which I kind of figure we're just holding up push here in case they dash a Ragavan or play a Dolphy or something, but instead they do neither, so we're going to get our basic swamp down. Down to Tarmogoyf. Yep. Kind of figured that if our opponent's playing nothing on turn 1, turn 2, not interacting, they probably just have a Blood Moon. Turns out they have a Spell Bomb, another Blood Moon, a Spyro in hand, a Spyro in exile that's coming back off this Reckless Impulse. So, yet again, a game that I really wish we had access to a basic forest. Because if I could have just gotten a forest first off one of these fetches and traversed for the swamp, we would have been A-okay. We would have had, like, all these Goyfs unlocked. We would have had Veil, whatever the case may be. Like, we really could have put a beat down here. But because we did not have a basic forest, we could not. So we will slowly fade off into the abyss here. While we draw a bunch of cards we can't cast under a Blood Moon. All right, so let's talk about thoughts and potential changes for the deck. I always have to talk about changes in the idea that, like, these are changes I would make based off my play style. So if you don't like the changes or the thought behind them, don't do it. It's fine. It is, you don't have to make the same changes. I'm not claiming any changes I make are right, but they're things that I feel the deck is lacking on. First off, the basic forest. I think it is very, very free with like Traverse the Ovenwald and makes playing around Blood Moon possible or playing through a Blood Moon possible. And I think you just give up like too much by not having access to your green under a Blood Moon. The second thing, kind of along that same idea, is this deck is very, very, very soft to artifacts and enchantments for like a green or black green based deck. Affinity's been on the rise. Amulet Titans everywhere. You've got Blood Moons in like 3 of the top 4 decks or something. Between like Murktide and Scam and the Teamer Rhinos deck. So if you're playing a deck right now that doesn't have some sort of game through a Blood Moon, you should probably reconsider. I would like to see some amount more of counter magic, even if it's just something simple like Spell Pierce, but just something to interact on the stack a little bit more. Like, you do have a couple Stubborn Denials, but I feel like you can do a bit better. Also, the list has a lot of like one-ofs. I know I personally am not a huge fan of having a bunch of one-ofs, like 1 Inquisition, 1 Abrupt Decay, 1 Hex Mage, 1 Grist, 1 Dryad Arbor. I feel like some of those might be cleaned up. Like Grist, we never actually wanted at any point during this league, but I can see it being a reasonable target off Traverse and Invasion. Abrupt Decay could probably just be another Inquisition, honestly. It's an okay spell, but I don't think it's like the end all be all. The dress downs were okay. Never anything crazy. I think I'd like to see, if it were up to me, I think I would do like minus a traverse, minus an abrupt decay, minus like 2 dress downs, and minus the Dryad Arbor for a forest, a couple drown in the locks, um, maybe another Inquisition, and maybe like a Dismember just to help out with shadows. There were a few times there that I was kind of stuck, but that realistically shouldn't be much of the case with like 4 Wraith, bunch of fetches, Thoughtseize, whatnot. Ultimately, in those 5 matches, the Ikoria Hex Mage plan like didn't really matter that much. I don't think Hex Mage was ever relevant. I think there was one time I cast Ikoria that would have been pretty good, but we would have just killed him without it. And then there was another time that I could have cast Ikoria for lethal, but we just found the fatal push anyway, so it didn't matter. Uh, but I also get the idea of having it as like this 4 mana, make all your board unblockable kind of play. But if that's the idea, if that's what you're trying to set up for, then I would like to see more ways of protecting that. So, like, dress down's a little bit less relevant. The counter magic gets better because now you're working on building a board and then having like a 1-turn combo finish with Ikoria for 4. But with only 18 or 19 lands, whatever it is, then hitting like a 4 mana spell on 4 or 5 can be a pretty big ask. In the sideboard, 4 dress down seems like a lot. I might consider 3 instead, but I think if you like dress down, it's fine. I love Spreading Seas. Collective Brutality, kind of meh. Not bad, but it's not really what I want to be doing for 2 mana in a deck like this. I really want to be focusing on like getting down a Goyf, getting down a Shadow plus protection, and I don't think Brutality really fits like that part of the game. Force of Vigor is okay. I think if you're concerned about artifacts and enchantments, I'd like to see you just go ahead and go up to like 3 Force of Vigor. And I think that would help out a ton with Invasion, Goyf, Traverse, Grist, all those things that you can sack to it. So yeah, I think Force of Vigor is fine. I would like to see the number of Force of Vigors up. Veil, even against Scam, like Veil felt like it was sitting in hand because they're just going Blood Moon and Spyro and Ragavan and Fury, where they're scamming on turn 1, in which case you have to have the Veil right then and there. And I don't know. I just don't feel like Veil for me has been doing enough. Mainly because all the decks that Veil should be good against are so good at not playing cards that like Veil does anything against. Like you play against Scam and they go, turn 1 Ragavan, bolt your dude, hit you. Turn 3 Spyro or Fable or Blood Moon. Turn 4 another one of those, and you're just like, could you please terminate my guy? And then the one turn you tap off of Veil, they're just sitting there with like Fatal Push or something because all their stuff's so cheap they can just wait. Nihil Spellbomb is reasonable. 3 EE seems like a bit much, but this could also be a situation where X-File was putting together a list specifically for the challenges, which is completely okay. And if that's the case, a lot of the card choices make more sense. For example, if you're expecting to run into a bunch of like scam and hammer time, living end, um, what else? Rhinos, then like EE, Spellbomb, Spreading Seas to an extent, Veil of Summer, all the dress downs look like exponentially better. But I think for playing in leagues, I would like to see more generic answers across the board. But again, that's a lot of like nitpicking. So we'll be playing some leagues at some point with a few of the updates I'm thinking. And obviously, I'll have those posted on here. But in the meantime, enjoy this list, give it a shot, see what you think, see if you are along the same lines of any of the changes I'm considering. If you are, awesome. If not, let me know what you're thinking in the comments below. Otherwise, hope you all have an awesome rest of your day. Stay safe, enjoy some good food and company. Catch you back live later. Adios for now.